up on this episode of Photography Online. We photograph local wildlife at both ends of the UK, we give your images a thorough examination, and we tell you all you need to know if you want to photograph the Aurora Borealis. Welcome to part 1 of our February 2021 episode of Photography Online. As you've just seen, I've got an action-packed show lined up for you, and I'll be telling you what you can expect from part 2 a little later on. But first, let's get this show on the road. So due to the current lockdown restrictions, our schedule has had to change several times, I might add, but we're ever prepared. And here is something that we filmed last year, all about interior property photography. If you want to photograph your house and give it the wow factor, then join us as we follow Photography Online expert Marcus as he shot a commercial assignment for a local self-catering business. But as always with Marcus, he gives us lots of generic photo tips which can be applied to many other photo situations as well. So take note and enjoy.
The Isle of Skye is a popular tourist destination, so there are lots of hotels and other accommodation which all need promotional photos of their spaces and facilities. I'm often paid to take such photos, so I thought it might be useful to invite you along on a typical shoot and share some of the tips I use for interior photography.
Hi Marcus.
How's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Welcome to Store Apartments.
Pretty special, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
The most important thing I'm looking to get across in my photos is a flavour of the character of the property. But first things first, take off my muddy boots. I then walk around the property to get a feel for all the spaces and think about where the best angles are going to be.
Basically what I've done is I've worked out all the key angles, so now I'm going to start photographing. And a good trick for photographing indoors, never ever photograph from eye level. So if I walked around and photographed everything with the camera up to my eye, what you're doing is you're giving a very familiar perspective of the room. So even though someone who's never been here before, when they're looking at the photos, they're looking at it, seeing it exactly how they'll see it. You might think that's a good thing. But if you put the camera lower, it achieves two things. Number one, it gives a very unusual perspective because we're not used to seeing things from this height down here. So as soon as you show somebody a photo of that, it doesn't matter whether it's a landscape or an interior shot, it looks more interesting because it's unusual. People might not know why, but it's unusual because we're not used to seeing things from 2 foot above the ground. And also, by getting it down low, you give a full sense of space. So if you think about back to when you were a small child, and if you've ever returned somewhere as an adult that you had been familiar with as a child, the first thing you do is you walk inside and you go, oh, this is much smaller than I remember. And that's just because you're looking at it from a higher viewpoint. If you get down low, things generally tend to look bigger with more space. And you have things in the foreground which give you that depth of field. So just by getting the camera down low, we achieve one very important thing, and that's to create an improved perspective and also a three-dimensional image which has got more space to it. I've got a very wide angle lens on here, but I need to be careful. If I shoot everything too wide angle, then people looking at the images who aren't familiar with the place, they get the sense of increased space, and then they walk in, the first thing they do is they're disappointed because it's not as big as it looked in the photos, which is obviously self-defeating. So we don't want to go too wide with everything, but there's some rooms, such as bathrooms, which are very small, where you do need to go wide in order to show all the appliances in one shot. So I'm going to start off in here, and my general approach is to shoot it at diagonals, and then I'll just work my way around the house and I'll talk you through what I'm doing as we go.
One of the most important factors when taking architectural shots is to keep vertical lines vertical.
That's now saying that the camera's perfectly level, and crucially, the lens is pointing dead straight. So in the middle there, you'll see that as I push that down, that's because you can have the camera level. So that's saying the camera's level, but the lens is pointing down. And can you see what's happened? All the lines on the right-hand side of the frame are leaning outwards this way. All the lines on the left-hand side are leaning to the left. So it looks like everything's kind of getting bigger towards the top. If I do the opposite and point the camera upwards, now everything's leaning inwards. It looks like it's kind of falling over backwards. That's what we want to avoid.
Once I've got the verticals sorted, another important factor is to pay attention to detail.
This white cable down here, aerial cable in the photo, is a bit of an eyesore, and I could take that out in Photoshop, but it would probably be a 2 or 3 minute job to do it properly, and it might or it might not be easier to just temporarily get that off the floor like that, and then that solved the problem. So that was much faster than having to do it in Photoshop. So what we've got here is we've got all the verticals, still vertical all the way across the frame. All the horizontals are going nicely diagonally. We've got a sense of the couch here, which is why I wanted to get the camera so far back, so that you can see that this is a seating area. But we also get a view through to the bedroom, and we also get a view through to the kitchen at the background there. So this gives people a good idea of the space that they're going to be living in. This is the obvious hero shot of the bedroom because it has the dresser in the background, and it's got this kind of feature chair in it as well. So you'll notice that I didn't have to do it because Nigel had done it beforehand, but he's put all the lights on, all the bedside lights, every single light that's available, just put them on, because even though we're shooting this in the middle of the day, and we don't need the lights on in order to see the room, what it does is it creates nice little shadows on the walls, and it stops the walls being too monotonous. Another thing with interior photography, it's important that when you put things down, that you remember that you put them there, because the amount of times I've left my phone on a table, and then when I've been editing the images, you think, well, what's that on there? And you realise that you've now got to clone your own phone out of the shot. So obviously we're in a bathroom now, and it's quite a limited space, and you tend not to have massive windows in bathrooms, so they're also quite dark. So we've got a feature bath here, and a little trick of the trade is to get a torch and hide the torch in the bottom of the bath, obviously turning it on, shine it against the front surface so you get a nice reflection. I'll show you that. So you can see the luminance in the bath is roughly the same as the light that's falling on the toilet and also on the top of the basin. And then we've brought the towels in as well because there's a nice bit of light falling on the towels. So those are the things that catch your eye. So what I've done is I've done all the wide angle shots, and now it's a case of going around with a kind of a prime lens, doing shallow depth of field, just on the details. Like this wall here is obviously a feature of the apartment, so we want to show that. And obviously all the antique furniture, just to give an idea of the atmosphere that you get in this apartment. So this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about, minimum depth of field. So I've just focused on the pen there. So you can see the background's very out of focus and the foreground's slightly out of focus, but it just gives an overall flavour of the kind of atmosphere in the apartment.
Finally, I finish up by shooting a couple of external shots to show the garden and the views.
If, like us, you're pretty much confined to your home at the moment, then hopefully some of that information will be of use. So as we find ourselves faced with new virus restrictions, we're starting to offer more online services to allow us to continue to work and for you to continue to have access to our services. One of the ways we're doing this is by offering a range of online camera club talks and presentations. If you belong to a camera club anywhere in the world and would like one of the Photography Online team to give a presentation, we've come up with a variety of topics to choose from. These are now available to check out on our website, for which I put a link in the description down below. Now, last month we launched a brand new feature called Wild Diaries, where we'll be talking you through everything you need to know if you want to improve your wildlife photography. We don't just want to show you what's available here in Scotland though, we want to include the whole of the UK and hopefully beyond. We found a way to bring you ideas from both the top and bottom of the country without breaking any travel restrictions. First, we're off to Devon and to Dartmoor National Park.
The current restrictions have sadly prevented me from visiting my new wildlife area, which I'm developing for future Wild Diaries shows. Happily though, in the meantime, I thought I'd get out and about and see what I'm able to photograph locally. Living on the fringes of Dartmoor National Park gives me the perfect opportunity to take a walk in one of the UK's most sought-after photographic locations. Dartmoor is famous for its wide open spaces, plus of course its ponies and rocky outcrops, its tors, and it's the heather and gorse that occur beneath many of these tors that I intend to explore today. I've come armed today with only a telephoto lens, as I know that anything that I'm likely to see is to be at a distance. So this will give me the ability to get optically closer. The very first thing I do is take a little time upon first approach to scan for movement. A good pair of binoculars will definitely help with this. It wasn't long before some movement in the heather and gorse caught my eye. Having spotted this movement, it was time to get a little closer and investigate a little further. There's a couple of deer about 100 metres or so in front of me here, so I'm just going to wait and observe them for a while deciding what the best sort of route of approach is likely to be. Also, the sun may well pop through at any moment, which will help out with the light. With roe deer such as these, indeed with all wildlife, it's always good to observe your subjects before shooting, as not only does this allow your subjects to settle and get used to your presence, it allows you the time to settle and think about backgrounds, direction of light, all things photographic. But most importantly, of course, you can just enjoy watching things unfold. I have actually moved a little because I needed to consider and take into account the wind direction. As if I'm upwind of the deer, they will feel more threatened and are less likely to hang about. They do actually know I'm here, but obviously I don't want to disturb them too much. These deer are used to seeing people, so my presence isn't going to disturb them. But the last thing I want to do is risk spooking them. Not only will this result in me getting no shots, but it's also simply just not good practice to disturb your wild subjects. This is where a telephoto lens comes into its own. It will allow me to get the deer reasonably large in frame without tempting me to get too close to them and disturbing them. This often leads to better photos anyway, giving subjects room to breathe, telling stories, putting them in context. That's what it's all about. I don't want to get a frame-filling headshot of a deer, which could be absolutely anywhere. I'm looking to show it in its environment, to make use of the beautiful colours, tones and textures that it lives within, to portray these amazing animals as naturally as possible. Today, because I was unsure exactly what I would find, and because, most importantly, I wanted to keep mobile, I decided to use this 100-400. It's versatile and more than hand-holdable. So, having discovered the deer, target acquired if you like, a quick look at some exposure settings. Manual mode, so I'm in control, set a shutter speed of around double that of the longest focal length of the lens, plus a bit for luck, so that's 1,000th of a second. Then select the widest non-variable aperture, so that's 5.6 with this particular lens. Finally, take a meter reading of the ambient light and adjust the ISO accordingly. Patience and observation, plus a little bit of creeping about, in the end pays off, as I'm rewarded with some great views and a few shots which achieve exactly what I was after, the deer of Dartmoor, or at least a few of them. Now, from one end of the country to the other, where my colleague Harry Martin has been observing a very different mammal altogether.
Thank you, James. It looks like I'll have to get down to Dartmoor myself pretty soon when I can. I'm here on Skye, of course, and you might remember in one of last year's episodes I showed you how to track and photograph otters. If you haven't seen that, then please go back and watch our May 2020 episode. Now, one of the best parts of my job is that I regularly head out to check up on individuals and otter families to keep tabs on their routines and their behaviours, an essential part of me being able to head out and run otter photography workshops. One of the most exciting discoveries I made recently was seeing a regularly watched otter of mine with a very young cub. The first time I saw them was not long since the cub had emerged from the holt, the place where it was born and really all that it had known up until that point it got into the water. Otters on Skye can have cubs at any time of the year, but many will give birth in late summer, with cubs then appearing through autumn and winter. I've been following the antics of this wee one for a couple of months now, and it's so wonderful to watch as it changes, grows and learns. At first, Mum would leave the cub tucked up on the shore, safe and sound, while she went to fish. She would eat anything small on the go, getting her fill, and then when she caught something larger, she'd bring it ashore for the cub. One of my favourite shots to get is when an otter is coming ashore with big fish. It's a good challenge trying to nail the moment it breaks the surface of the water and get an interesting and dynamic image. Focus here can be really difficult. In autofocus, it's easy for the camera to lock onto splashes of water and waves rather than the otter. I'll often switch between autofocus with a single focus point and full manual focus, depending on just how rough the water is. Now, when the mum brings a fish back, she started letting it go in very shallow water for the cub. This is all part of the steep learning curve cubs have to go through in order to start catching their own food. It's both amazing and hilarious watching a baby otter racing back and forth trying unsuccessfully to catch a fish, or instead successfully catching a bit of tasty seaweed. I've watched the cubs swimming underwater in the shallows a couple of times, and with our beautifully clear water here on Skye, you can see right through and see it darting about underneath the surface. I reckon there's an image to be had here, along with other great bits of behaviour that I haven't captured yet. Stay tuned for future Wild Diaries episodes to see if I manage to capture them.
Although we're in the depths of winter here in the UK, spring is just around the corner and it won't be long before we're flooded with migrating bird species. So now is the best time to start putting some thought into getting a photo project on the go to document the wildlife in your local area, even if this is just in your back garden. We'll be working on showing you what's possible in the coming months, and I'm looking forward to keeping up to date with what the guys find to photograph as the seasons unfold. Wild Diaries is sponsored by Kite Optics, who among other things make amazing binoculars, something which can be invaluable for spotting and observing wildlife. There's a link in the description below if you want to find out more. We'll also be giving away a Kite Optics prize very soon, so if you want to add a top spec set of binoculars to your kit, then keep an eye out for that. Now, many of you have been sending us your images, and it's safe to say that our inbox has been bursting at the seams. If you've sent us a lone tree image as part of our subject project, which we launched this year, then we've put together a gallery of some of our favourites, which we'll be showcasing in part 2 of this month's show, so make sure you don't miss that. In the meantime, we're going to take a look in more detail at some of the other photos that you've been sending in. Next up, it's time to join Nick Hansen in the Photography Online surgery.
I've got 5 nervous customers in the waiting room, so let's get the first one up onto the examination table. So here we have this winter sunrise shot by Andy McDonald, captured up in the Eildon Hills in the Scottish Borders. Really nice composition here. Andy has made good use of the rule of thirds by placing the peaks of the hills roughly on the intersecting horizontal thirds. Now in terms of the vertical thirds, Andy has kind of gone against the grain here, so if we say that's about the horizon there, obviously it ends up with 2/3 sky and 1/3 land. Nothing wrong with that at all. Rules are made to be broken. Normally you'd have 2/3 land, 1/3 sky. Obviously Andy has seen this really nice sky and wanted to show it off with some really nice kind of subtle colours in it towards the right of the frame here, going across the cloud here. And really nice use of the path, kind of coming in from the bottom right hand frame, going up here, and then also going through the frame there. So leading your eye through the frame. Just a couple of things that kind of, I'm being nitpicky here, is this area here with the 2 lochs, and on the right of the frame just this bright patch here. So my eye just kept drawn to those. I kept going left of the frame, right of the frame. If we just look at this next image where I've just cropped them out, for me it's just a slightly stronger composition. So let's move on to the next shot by Sampo Lenzi. Now this was taken at the Keltman Extremes Scottish Triathlon. So really nice use of the road here, so the winding road going through the frame down here, and also placing the subject, shall we say, which is obviously the triathlete on his bicycle, on the apex of the bend in the road. Now, one thing I'm not a big fan of is this bright area here on the edge of the frame, because obviously your subject is over here, but I kept finding that my eye was being drawn to this, this bright patch over here. Also, just this area here, Sampo has used this rocky area here to get a slightly higher elevation to look down the road. Nothing wrong with that, but just including it doesn't work for me personally, so I've done a crop on it again like the previous image, and I just think that's a stronger image. And next up we have this image by David YOWE. Now, rather than using a very quick exposure time of say 1/8000th of a second to freeze the car and make it look like it was basically just standing still on the racetrack and moving the camera with the car, David has decided to use a longer exposure time. And what this does is this blurs the background and areas of foreground whilst keeping the subject, the car, as sharp as possible. And this just creates a lot of dynamism in the image. You can tell that the car is moving very fast. In terms of composition, spot on, placing the car on the left of the frame, plenty of room on the right of the frame, for the car to move into. Moving on to this image by RUNAR LARSSON. Now, RUNAR says that it's a result of 27 photos in 3 groups. Each group is focus stacked and has different exposure time. Now, I take it he means that he is exposure bracketed. And then he's merged it into 3 photos and then merged to H2R to one single photo. So RUNAR has made really nice use of this rock here because it's, the line on the rock is pointing up, so it draws your eye through the frame. Now, I'm not a massive fan of this plant or weed here sticking up from the bottom of the frame. If RUNAR could have moved it if it was dead or placed the camera in front of it, it would have just made it a lot stronger. The overall image has got a slightly kind of bluer feel to it. It maybe was taken during the blue hour, I don't know. I would have preferred it if RUNAR had gone back when there was more movement in the water, so the water was maybe potentially lapping over these rocks, and it just created a bit more dynamism in the frame. So in terms of the exposure bracketing, I don't think there was any need for that because there's no real deep shadows or bright highlights. In terms of the focus bracketing, so what he's probably done is say focus down here, maybe here, here, and at the back to create that full front to back sharpness. Now, is that necessary? Again, I don't think so, because when I look at the image, first and foremost, my eye kind of almost starts there, and that's how it would be if I was standing there taking the shot. So, so does this bottom, part of the frame need to be pin sharp? Feel free to give me your opinion in the comments below. Moving on to the final critique image, and this is by KRUMMACHER or KRUMMACHER. Sorry if I butchered your surname there, Frank. Now, what Frank has done is he's actually created a panel here, so it's not just one frame cropped right down to a very narrow image. He's actually taken 3 shots and merged them together. In terms of the exposure, the highlights are blown here, and there's areas up here where the highlights are blown, and then down at the bottom. So just be careful with the exposure when you're photographing things like waterfalls, and when you're at the coast or whatever. Just really exposing for the highlights is probably what you need to do most of the time. In terms of the bottom of the frame, I think there's too much of the bottom of the frame, so I've done a crop here just to remove some of the rock from the bottom. Whether it makes it stronger or not, that's my opinion. Again, feel free to give your opinion in the comments below. It's always good to hear other people's opinion. And just one thing, if possible, if Frank could have, now he was on a decking viewing platform here, if he could have moved to the left a bit, maybe, so the camera was pointing from this direction, you may have excluded this rock here, because I just find that the rock cutting off the bottom of the waterfall just a bit distracting for me. So before I go, I couldn't go without mentioning this image by Andrew Coleman, and now this was taken at near Dalcross Airport in the autumn, and it's just an absolutely stunning image. I can't really give any negative critique on it. It's just an absolutely stunning image. You've got this lovely bright tree here, which has been picked up by the light coming in from the left of the frame, and picking up some of the leaves here as well. And this main focal point of the image, this brighter tree here, is being nicely framed by these 2 trees, and obviously these 2 trees on the left of the frame. So really nice image by Andrew. So that's it for this month's surgery session. If you'd like your image to be featured in a future show, all of the information can be found in the link section below.
One of the upcoming shows is going to be dedicated to panoramic photography, so if you have any pano images you'd like our opinion on, and by panoramic I mean around 3 times wider than they are tall, then send those in to our surgery feature and we'll try to squeeze them in on the show. Now, if you want to help support photography online and help us produce better content, then there are a number of ways that you can do this. Firstly, you can become an official supporter by clicking the join button or going to the relevant link in the description, where you'll see a separate video from me explaining all the options. You can also join us on our monthly webinar, Mc2 Live, which is 90 minutes of photography goodness, all done live, which allows you to interact in real time. Details are also down below. And finally, you can help out by spreading the word, telling your friends friends or anyone you know who might be interested in picking up their camera or even starting from scratch. We aim to enthuse as many people as we can. One of the easiest ways though that you can help is to simply press the like button. Not only does this allow us to see you appreciate the work we do, it also helps the video get suggested to more people watching YouTube, so give us a like if you can. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, here we are in the depths of winter, but one thing which this is perfect for, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, is astrophotography, and in particular the Aurora Borealis or the Northern Lights. But if you've never tried to photograph an aurora display before, it can seem a bit daunting. Fear not though, as we've put together a two-part guide to photographing one of the most sought after nighttime subjects. In this first part of our aurora feature, we're looking at the most difficult part, how to get yourself in the right place at the right time.
Over the past few years, one of the most popular natural phenomena to photograph has been the Aurora Borealis. It's only been practical to get great shots of aurora displays since digital cameras have been able to capture decent images at high ISO settings. In the days of film, it was simply too difficult to get a decent shot. But here we are in 2021, where even the most basic of new cameras can perform reasonably well at ISO 6400 or above.
If you want to photograph the aurora, then I'm going to tell you everything you need to know.
In part 2 of this feature, we'll look at what equipment you will need. But before that, there's something far more important. In order to photograph the aurora, you need to be able to see the aurora. And this is what prevents most people from having the chance to shoot it.
There are 5 key factors we need to consider when taking aurora photographs. Now, the good news is that 3 of these are totally predictable or certainly within our control. The bad news is the other 2 are totally out of our control, so there's always going to be an element of luck involved. Let's look at the predictable ones first.
Put simply, the closer to the poles you are, the better your chance of seeing aurora. Think of it like snow. The closer to the equator you go, the less chance there is of seeing it.
Here at Photography Online, we're lucky enough to be based far enough north that we get regular aurora sightings, but it's only the strongest of these that make really good photos.
The weaker and more common displays are often just seen as a white or green haze on the horizon and are nothing to get too excited about, but they do act as a great opportunity to hone your skills so that when a good display does occur, any mistakes have hopefully been ironed out. The best place to see the lights in the UK is from Shetland, but it is possible to see them from any part of the country. If you live south of Glasgow though, then your chances start diminishing rapidly, and it may only be once every few years that you will get to see a decent display. If you want to travel further afield, then Norway, Iceland, Canada and Alaska are all great places from which to witness the aurora, which at these locations is also known as the Northern Lights. The same phenomena occurs around the South Pole, where it is known as the Southern Lights. But unless you're able to get to Antarctica, there are far less land-based options to get far enough south to see it.
You also need to be in a location far from light pollution and with a clear view to the northern horizon. One important factor to consider is what you're going to use as a subject. Now, a shot of the aurora on its own isn't going to be that impressive, so you really need something else to provide the magic. So think about the aurora as just being the environment for which that can happen.
Ideally, you want to choose a subject which protrudes above the horizon and well into the sky, and one that has a recognisable shape such as this church, for example, as unless you light this, it will be seen purely as a silhouette. If you're able to get reasonably close to your subject, then you may be able to artificially light it to create an extra dimension, but don't light it so much that it detracts from the aurora. If you want some tips on how to do this, we explained all about painting with light in last month's show.
Another factor to consider is not to get too close to your subject. Because we're going to be shooting at a very wide aperture, it's going to give us a very shallow depth of field, but of course we're going to be focused on infinity, so anything closer than infinity is going to appear soft. Now, where infinity starts is totally dependent on your focal length.
Basically, convert your focal length to meters and you should be okay using this as a minimum distance at around f2.8 or more. For example, if you're using a 24mm lens, don't have your subject closer than 24 meters. Water can also work well to reflect the aurora, essentially doubling its size in the frame, but you still need to have a focal point.
Once it gets dark, ideally you want the moon to be well below the horizon, as if it's visible, it will prevent the sky from going totally black, and therefore it will reduce the contrast between the sky and the aurora. Now if you leave it up to chance, then you've got a 50-50 chance of the moon being out of the way, but this is 100% predictable. So if you are planning a trip to Norway or Iceland, don't plan it during a full moon.
If you find that a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to shoot the aurora from the location you live in coincides with the moon being in the sky, then the smaller it is, the better. A thin crescent moon won't make too much of a difference, but a full moon will be a disaster.
Now we come down to the final two factors, which are the ones that are out of our control, but they can be predicted to a fairly accurate degree. Now hopefully it won't come as too much of a surprise when I tell you that you're going to need clear skies. Now if you've got a few clouds scattered around, as we've got here, that can actually add to the scene, but a majority of your view wants to be clear, especially to the north.
Weather forecasts are the thing to watch here, but don't just look at one and assume that it will be accurate. Use 3 or 4 different sites and cross-reference them. The Aurora app, which we're going to discuss in a moment, also shows real-time cloud coverage for the whole of Europe.
So we're in an ideal location, check. We have a suitable subject, check. We have a clear view to the northern horizon, check. And we have clear skies. Okay, well we just need to use a bit of imagination there. So all we need now is aurora activity. Now this is where lots of people think it gets complicated, but predicting the aurora is no different from predicting the weather. In fact, aurora activity is simply weather in space. All we need to do is look it up online to see whether or not it's likely to happen.
To get the view of an expert, I caught up with Andy Stables, who runs the Aurora Alerts UK website and app. Having spent many years studying and photographing the aurora, he's the go-to guy when it comes to lights in the sky. For photographers who are wanting to photograph the aurora, what should they look out for in terms of the research that they do? How are they going to know when the aurora is going to happen?
Right, so the best thing to do is to get my app and install that on your phone. And you can also use it on your laptop or your PC. It works on everything.
What we'll do is we'll put a link to your website in the video description so that people know where to go. But typically speaking, how far in advance would you say people can accurately predict some kind of activity?
You can accurately predict from about 27 days in advance. Because the sun spins around on its axis, and as we view it, it spins every 27.5 days. So what happens is you get these things called coronal holes that emit plasma as the solar wind that comes at the Earth, and they cause auroras. And those holes can stay open for several rotations of the sun. So it's possible to predict sometimes 2 or 3 months even in advance if it's a hole that keeps staying open.
If you were looking, say, 3 or 4 days ahead, is that more predictable than looking 27 days ahead, or does it make no difference?
There are cameras on satellites that are taking images of the sun, so you can actually see the coronal holes. So as it rotates around the hole, you'll see that when it's dead centre, that plasma's coming towards us. So about 3 to 4 days later, it hits the Earth, by which time that actual coronal hole has moved a little on the solar disk. And what will happen is it disappears off the imagery and it goes around the back of the sun, and then 5 or 6 days before it's going to be in the middle again, you'll start to see it turning on, so you can see that it's still there and it's still the same size. So you get that good sort of 5 or 6 day period before it comes around again that you can tell that you're still good.
And is there any equipment between us and the sun that can detect that as it passes?
Yeah, so what happens is there's a satellite sitting at the L1 position, which is about 1 million miles from Earth between us and the sun. That's called Discover, and it's basically got a magnetometer. It's measuring the magnetic field coming from the sun. It's measuring the speed and the density of the plasma that's coming. So it basically acts as the next early warning system that basically tells you for certain that this thing's coming. So like yesterday morning about 8:30, it detected a shock, which is where a wave of plasma, like a tsunami of plasma, just hit the satellite. And my app picks that up and sends out an alert to tell people that it's detected the interplanetary shock, which basically means the plasma's coming, and then about an hour later it hits the Earth. And then the aurora was starting, but obviously in the day because it hit about 8:30 in the morning. But the effects lasted the whole day. So last night, as soon as it was dark, in the afternoons, from about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, people in Finland started reporting on the app that they were getting the aurora. And then obviously as soon as it started to get dark here, it was coming through the twilight in the evening. And then we had a great aurora show last night.
Is it possible to go too far north? So, for example, I've been in the Faroe Islands before, and I've seen on social media an amazing aurora here in Scotland, and it was clear and I saw nothing, and yet I'm further north. So in that situation, was I too far north?
Yeah, it's a really lucky situation for us, because the aurora's like a donut around the magnetic pole.
Yeah.
And as it gets stronger, it pushes towards the equator, so it can actually pass right over you, and then the auroral arc moves much further south of you and you can see nothing at all.
And you wish you'd just stayed at home?
Yeah, it's a very rare thing to happen, so it's not common.
So we think of the aurora as being a winter event, but obviously it needs to be dark for you to see the aurora. So do they happen equally 24 hours a day, 365 days a year? It's just that we notice them more in the winter because it's dark more often, or
yeah, they're happening all the time, all year round. Obviously, sometimes are better than others. So the equinoxes, you get much more. The substorms that cause the auroras, you get much more of those in the equinoxes. So autumn and spring.
So when we see photographs of aurora, the most common colour we see is green, certainly from here. But then occasionally you'll see other colours further up in the atmosphere. What causes those colours, and do they differ from geographic place to geographic place?
The colour is basically caused by the particles coming into the atmosphere from the plasma, reacting with the molecules in the air. So things like the oxygen, it causes the yellow and the greens, and nitrogen causes the red. And they're really the two colours that we see. The commonest problem with aurora colours is that people do a lot of manipulation with the cameras. They mess with the white balance, and that you'll get this thing of the mythical blue aurora. But what's actually happened is they put the white balance on tungsten, so they've basically changed all the yellows and greens into blues and shades of blue. So it's not really representative of what the colour is.
For someone who photographs the aurora probably more than 99.9% of people, what's the thing that gets you really excited when you see it happening?
It's basically when you get that night when it really explodes, when the sky is full of it, when it's overhead. That is just incredible. So every night you're going out there doing run-of-the-mill aurora, just a straight band of green with a pink top. Every night it's the same thing, sometimes it's a bit bigger, sometimes you manage to get some rays, but then on those top nights when it really kicks off, it's absolutely unbelievable.
And you get all the structure, and it's kind of up above you rather than just on the horizon.
When you get all the structure, the sky is full of it, and when you can point the camera straight up and get the corona over the top of you, see all in the columns going up vertically, then it's amazing. And when you see it in colour with your eyes, because mostly, obviously the thing that catches people out is that they expect to see what the photos are catching, and what you actually see is just white and shades of white, monochrome. But when you get a really good strong one, then it's full colour with your eyes, and it's really impressive.
And how often here would you say that happens?
Getting it in colour to my eyes, and everyone's eyes are different, but colour to my eyes, maybe half an hour a year.
Right.
And I'm photographing auroras all night, every night.
Yeah. So it's quite a rare event.
So it's very rare, yeah.
A Big thanks to Andy Stables there. If you're interested in seeing or photographing the Aurora, then you won't find a more accurate forecasting app than the one Andy has designed himself. The best part is that it's totally free, so as promised there's a link to his website below. So the only thing standing between you and a great photo of the Aurora is knowing what equipment, camera settings and shooting technique to go for. We'll be giving you the full rundown of this in our next show, so make sure you don't miss that. Incidentally, there's a chapter all about astro and aurora photography in our Essential Camera Skills book. It's 68 pages crammed full of hints and tips from the show's experts and comes in both a physical and a PDF version, so if you'd like either, then check out the relevant link. Sadly though, that's it for part 1 of our February 2021 show, but you don't have to wait long for your next Photography Online fix. I'll be back in just 2 weeks with part 2, where we'll be looking at where you can and can't save money in photography, taking you along on a sunrise shoot, continuing our Aurora feature and showcasing some of your lone tree photos. Until then, take good care, but most of all, take good photos.